We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? Uh-huh. What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hello listeners, this is Paula Schaffner with episode 36, The Exidor Affair. This first aired on December 2nd, 1979. The IMDb synopsis is, Mindy's level of annoyance with Exidor hits an all-time high when he invites himself and his new girlfriend Ambrosia to dinner. This was the 27th episode directed by Howard Storm, the 6th written by Dale McRaven, and the 5th written by Bruce Johnson. Incidentally, it's the 8th Exidor episode, if we count the season opener as one episode. We start with the sunny exterior of the house, and there is no snow anywhere in this episode, even though it aired in December. Mindy is on the phone with the typewriter on the dining table. She says, "Yes, Frank, I know you're the editor of the school newspaper," so a bit of exposition, "but I can't write this article. She thinks it's stupid. Feminism, myth or mytheth?" So punning on Miss or Mrs., although you would think there would be a Ms. joke in there. This is the first time in a while they've mentioned Mindy either going to school or working in journalism. It's just a one-liner, but I did appreciate that, and we get the little mention of the editor. She tells Frank that they'll talk about it tomorrow. She says goodbye and she hangs up. Mork enters to enthusiastic applause. He tells Mindy that there was a simple misunderstanding. They told him not to talk about it, but he does have to say that the goat was already dead. She doesn't want to hear about this. He calls her a smart girl and says it'll blow over in a year or two. And this is the last this will be mentioned in this episode, so we never find out what happened to that poor goat. There's a knock. Mindy says if anybody up there is listening, please save her from this insanity. So of course she opens the door to Exidor, who says, "Hi there, curly lips," and there's applause. Mindy says that no one was listening, as in God is not answering her prayers. Exidor and Mork greet each other as usual, but this time Mork covers his eyes and says who wants to know if it's Mork. Exidor replies, "Mrs. Exidor's future husband." Mindy mutters that she can't believe this. Exidor looks around and exclaims, "Mork, I'm glad you dropped by." Mork nods and suggests that Exidor sit down and take a load off his dock waders. As they head into the living room, Mork says that all that rubber must get irritating sometimes, so referring to Exidor's boots. Mindy by now is sitting in the chair on stage right. Mork asks, "What's this I hear about a Mrs. Exidor?" Exidor is excited. He's about to sit down, but then he finds Pepe. He holds Pepe on his finger like he's a bird and tells him, "You sit under me one more time and you sucked your last margarita." Mork and Exidor sit. Exidor's fiancée is named Ambrosia Malspar, of the Hog's Breath Gulch Malspars. Mindy has heard of them and says she thought they were all caught. As in criminals? Exidor says from the moment they met, he heard bells, so Mork guesses that she's a prize fighter. Exidor says, "A romantic, you're not." Exidor says he dropped by to invite them to dinner tonight to meet her. He asks if they're free. Mindy starts to refuse, but Mork accepts. Mindy has moved over to the couch arm, so she whispers down at Mork that she doesn't care to meet an invisible fiancé. He whispers back, "How long could it take?" Exidor suggests 8 o'clock tonight, and here. Mork says that's real convenient. They don't have to make reservations. Mindy starts to object. Exidor thinks her objection is to Pepe and says don't worry because he has a highlight tournament tonight. And then Exidor chuckles and exits. Mork stands up and tells Mindy that he's real proud of her. He knows that sometimes she thinks Exidor's a twit, yet she overcame her hang-ups and invited Exidor and his fiancée over for dinner. And he says she's a real credit to Shixadum. So a few things. 1, he's acting as if it was Mindy's invitation. And 2, I think she thinks he's a lot more than a twit. I thought it was interesting that the synopsis describes this as her annoyance reaches an all-time high. I don't know if that's true, but it does get pretty intense here. And of course, yet another moment where he's calling her a shiksa, which we've been seeing off and on this season in particular. Meanwhile, she's gone into the kitchen and taken a frozen chicken out of the refrigerator. She hands it to Mork and tells him to stuff it, which was a popular sitcom almost swearing kind of joke. We get a nighttime exterior of the house, and Mork says he's sensing a lot of hostility. He asks her what's bothering her and tickling her little innards. She says, "You, Exidor, and Ambrosia." He says he's glad she got that off her chest. Then he asks if she made that clam dip. She says she's not finished yet. He says, "Está más?" She says, "Más more." So there's a lot of Spanish and pseudo-Spanish in this episode. She says that she resents Exidor inviting himself to dinner almost as much as she resents having to cook dinner for an invisible fiancé. She says this is the foothills of kinky. I mean, it's weird, but I wouldn't say it's kinky. Mork asks if she's ever considered that Exidor's fiancée might be a real flesh and blood woman. She says no. He says me neither. He tells her that Exidor means well. If this will make him happy, at least let him have his moment. People in robes have so few. There's a knock, so Mork says that the lovebirds are here. He calls out to the door, "We'll be right with you, loveroosums." He tells Mindy to be nice to Exidor and try not to stare at Ambrosia.
Mindy, it's Exidor! And guess who's with him?
You must be Ambrosia. You're everything I imagined. I like your dress.
Who are you talking to?
I'm talking to the lovely Ambrosia.
But there's nobody there. I think the little lady's been smoking her braids again. I mean, you don't see anybody here, do you?
Not me.
Now he thinks I'm the one that's crazy?
Oh, I didn't say that. I just said your oil wasn't touching the dipstick.
Did you or did you not state that you were bringing your fiancé here to dinner tonight?
Methinks I hear her dainty step upon the stair. And this is my beloved.
All right, that's it. The party is over.
Gee, I'm sorry I missed it.
So this is playing off really nicely over the established thing of Exidor and his invisible friends and followers that we get not only in this episode, but since his introduction. So it was nice to get that payoff here that he actually does know a real flesh and blood person besides Mork and Mindy. Plus, I like that they have Mindy, who is usually the sanest person in the room, now being treated as the craziest. Although definitely you could take issue with how sanity and insanity and mental illness and so on are treated in this episode. Although I think it's meant benignly. And I thought it was funny that Exidor says that Mindy is smoking her braids, which both implies that Mindy wears her hair in braids, which we did see in the hospital episode. And also it's sort of a drug joke, but not quite. And we have Mindy being annoyed at Mork teaming up with Exidor against her. In this scene and elsewhere, we have Mindy's barely controlled anger. I mean, it crosses over from annoyance into not quite rage, but she is definitely on edge. We have her thinking that Ambrosia really is invisible and non-existent when there's nobody when Exidor opens the door, and then we get the surprise of the actual woman and the audience's delight at seeing Exidor's fiancé, not only because he's got a real fiancé, but because of the casting. Although she wasn't a household name on the level of Raquel Welch, 31-year-old Georgia Engel was a familiar face to TV viewers, particularly at that time. She had finished up her run as Georgette Franklin Baxter on Mary Tyler Moore in 1977. About a month after this, she would start her role on the short-lived sitcom Good Time Girls, which also had Peter Scolari and some other recognizable faces. In every role I've seen her in, she is just so sweet and adorable and funny. And she brings that with her into the role, so you would just have to be a really evil person to hate her. And so I think that that helps in this role, that we are poised to like her just from that first moment she comes in. Exidor makes introductions, and Mork loudly tells Mindy that Ambrosia is over there. She gets annoyed with him again. There's an awkward silence, and then Ambrosia asks if she can sit down. Mindy tells her to come in and apologizes. Exidor says it's about time, and then he confides in Ambrosia, be gentle with her. She could use a little hamburger helper. It's a reference to the popular meal additive, I guess it would be, that you would see advertised quite a bit in the 70s, and it's still around today. Ambrosia goes over and tells Mindy, don't worry, your kind of problem doesn't carry the stigma it used to. And from another character, this would seem really offensive, but it is meant in a good way. Mindy, of course, is barely containing her anger. Everyone sits down, and this time Mindy takes the stage left chair. Ambrosia and Exidor sit close together on the stage left side of the couch, and Mork sits at the other end. Ambrosia says that Mork is Exidor's best friend, and she wants him to tell her about himself. He says he's a son of a black hole, his mother was a petri dish, and his father was an eyedropper. And he says kind of a cosmic clone, and I don't know if he means himself or his father. And of course, we would hear more about his background in the first season, but I like that they carried that over into season 2. Ambrosia whispers to Exidor, just to double check, Mindy's the one with a problem, because of course Mork is coming across as mentally ill now. Mork asks how these two lovebirds met. Exidor happily says that Ambrosia chalked him, so Mork thinks this has something to do with the new sexual revolution. Ambrosia says she doesn't think so. She's a meter maid, and I have to say, I really wish we'd had a scene of her in her meter maid uniform, because I'm sure she would have been adorable. She was riding her motor scooter, chalking tires, and Exy, as she calls him, was lying on his back in the road, fixing his burrow. And I don't think it means like fixing a cat, but more like fixing a car. Mork guesses that the hard part was jacking the burrow up. Ambrosia accidentally chalked Exidor's boots. So there's a meet cute for you. Mindy gets up and suggests cheese hors d'oeuvres before dinner. Mork says he'll take the d'oeuvres, like it's cheese hors d'oeuvres. And then he does his bark laugh.
You two take your time. Amber and I will just sit here and make little fishy faces at one another.
So we get a cute little scene of Exidor and Ambrosia being flirty. Now Mork and Mindy are in the kitchen, and Mindy can't get over it. Ambrosia's real and seems perfectly normal. Mork says unless she's a hologram, which I think is at least the second hologram mentioned in the series. As Mindy puts hors d'oeuvres on a plate, she says Ambrosia's nice, charming, sane, nothing like Exidor, which is pretty insulting of Exidor, but it's true. She thinks that Ambrosia is going to be good for Exidor. Even tonight, he's acting relatively normal. Then Exidor yells, "Stop that pounding, we're not deaf." Mork pats Mindy's hand and says, "Hold that thought." Exidor says he'll get the door. He again says to stop the pounding. He opens the door and says, "What are you doing here?" Ambrosia asks who it is and calls him sweetheart. He says it's Pepe. She says it's Pepe, because that's how she pronounces it. Mork says it looks like Pepe to him. Mindy says it can't be Pepe. Pepe's playing highlight tonight. And then she says, "What am I saying?" Ambrosia tells Mork and Mindy she knows they're trying to protect Exidor, but it's as plain as the nose on your face what's going on, especially when Pepe's standing right there. Mork and Mindy look and say in sync, "He is?" Ambrosia says that Exidor promised that Pepe wouldn't be here tonight. He calls her guppy lips. As she gets up and heads towards the front door, she asks why they can't ever be alone. Why does Pepe always have to tag along?
You said you wanted to light my fire, but 3 on a match is too much.
Flamingo clothes! Pepe, you stay right here. Don't you dare follow us!
I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to bed. For a week.
That thing of her lowering her usually high, sweet voice is something I vaguely remember from Mary Tyler Moore. The phrase 3 on a match is a dated one, according to Wikipedia. It has to do with soldiers and cigarettes, and it goes back to the Crimean War through World War II. So even in the late 70s, it was a dated phrase, but I vaguely remember hearing that. And there was a movie in the 30s called 3 on a Match. And we get Exidor doing another pet name, and we have his anger at Pepe, and of course Mindy's anger at Mork. And then at the end, it looks like he's miming a conversation with Pepe. We get another nighttime exterior of the house, and the upstairs lights are off, but one goes on as we hear knocking. Mork and Mindy are in their nightwear, so he's in his red and white sleep shirt and hat, and she's in her yellow robe. Exidor is posed in the doorway with his foot up on a trunk. Mork says Muscatel heaven, so it's implying that Exidor has been drinking cheap wine. Exidor says, thanks for the ride, boys. I assume these are more of his invisible friends. We will find out that the burro is with him, but maybe the burro got into the vehicle. Mork welcomes him in and suggests he sit down. Exidor says, what's wrong? As if that's what Mork just said, and you can see Robin Williams almost breaking character. I'll tell you what's wrong. He says that Ambrosia dumped him. She says she wouldn't marry him if he was the last prophet on earth, which he is. Mindy says she's sorry to hear about that, and she sounds sincere. Mork tells Exidor one day he'll meet a girl that's right for him in every way. Exidor asks if he really thinks so, and Mork says no, but at least you had hope for a moment. And Exidor sincerely thanks him. Kind of cynical, but Mork's trying. Exidor says he just dropped by to say adios. He's shuffling off this mortal coil, and he wants Mork to have all his worldly possessions. So here and later, it sounds like he's going to commit suicide, although they never directly deal with that. He hands Mork his suitcase. Mork thanks him, and then he realizes that the suitcase feels empty. Exidor says that that suitcase is all his worldly possessions. So I don't know what happened to the apartment that he was staying in with that invisible girlfriend. Obviously, they broke up some time ago. I don't know what happened to his cabin in the woods. For that matter, I don't know what happened to the Friends of Venus headquarters. But maybe these were all rentals. Exidor does have one other worldly possession, a large rock. And he's saving that for transportation. He's going to tie it to his leg when he goes on vacation in Atlantis. Mindy again looks annoyed. Mork tells Exidor he's not going anywhere. He's going to spend the night here. Tomorrow morning things will look a lot better. He guides Exidor over to the couch. Exidor asks what if they don't, as in look better. Mork says that Exidor will stay here until they do. That might take forever, but that's all right. Mork and Mindy say each other's names, and then Mork says it's settled. It's time to hit the sack. A little Mondo Dodo. So the Mondo thing again, I don't know what Dodo means. Maybe dozing? Exidor says that's very kind of them both, and they won't even know he's here. Mork and Mindy say goodnight. Exidor dives onto the couch, face down. Then he howls. Mindy says that he's Bane. Mork says, well, there is a full moon. Exidor howls again. I think more so in the first season, we had Mork inviting people over to stay without really consulting Mindy or her reluctantly giving in. Haven't seen as much of that this season. We did have Nelson staying over, but he is Mindy's cousin. Obviously, this is something that Mork and Mindy should have discussed more, but Mindy does give in. I think she feels sorry for Exidor, even though she's at the height of annoyance. There's another sunny daytime exterior of the house. Exidor is sitting on top of the couch and looking more glum than usual. Mork is telling a story that really seems to amuse himself. The alpha says to the beta, the muzzle, take it off, I want to kiss her. And then the alpha said, why? Are we nailed to a chicken? Which doesn't really make any sense because the alpha spoke and the alpha spoke again, unless I messed up in my notes. And so it's like a meta joke. Like it has all these elements like so-and-so says to so-and-so and there's a chicken. I assume it's an Orkin joke. I don't know. Mork laughs really hard at it as if he just thinks it's hilarious. Exidor deadpanly says it's wildly hysterical, but he's empty. His life is over. He's going out to kiss his burro goodbye. And I thought there was going to be an ass joke, but I think it's just implied. Mork says Exidor can't do that. Where's the old Exidor spirit? Exidor says it's locked up in Ambrosia's cold, cold heart. And of course what we saw of Ambrosia, she is not a cold person, but Exidor has been very hurt by her rejection. Mindy enters from the bedroom and irritably says, will you kindly take your boots off my sofa? Mork goes over and touches her arm. He says Exidor has squatter's rights. He wants her to show Exidor some compassion. The man's on the ragged edge. Exidor says he's going to take a hike upstairs to Mork's lake. The leaves are changing, so I guess it's still fall. They just drop off, shrivel up, and die. It's hard to keep from laughing, and he heads upstairs. Mindy says that's it. Exidor's gotta go, or she's gonna end up as Looney Tunes as he is. Mork says they've got to help him. They can't just discard him like an old Carter cabinet member, and the audience laughs and applauds. The turnover of the Carter cabinet by 1979 was definitely cause for amusement, though Reagan would shortly challenge this, and I believe Trump would outdo them both. Mindy touches Mork's arm and agrees, as in she's not going to discard Exidor like a cabinet member. What she can do is try to get Ambrosia to take Exidor back. There's a sunny exterior of a couple cute apartment buildings. They're white and they have kind of a square look to them. And it's very different than the swinging singles look of Kathy's apartment building earlier in this season. We zoom in on an upstairs window. The interior is bright and cheerful and cozy, and it's got throw pillows and flowers and lots of yellow, and so it just really seems to suit Ambrosia. Ambrosia is pouring tea, and she's got a blue and white tea set. Mindy asks why Ambrosia really broke up with Exidor. Ambrosia says she'd rather not discuss it. Mindy says Ambrosia shouldn't just let Exidor go. He's a very, she pauses, and then finally says, unique person. When they dropped Exidor, they broke the mold. Ambrosia smiles fondly and says they sure did. He's kind, considerate, a snappy dresser, and let's not forget that swell sense of humor. So clearly she's seeing qualities in Exidor that Mindy cannot. Mindy asks why Ambrosia broke up with him. She says it's that friend of his, Peppy. He won't leave them alone. They go to a swap meet. There's Peppy. They go skateboarding. There's Peppy. Tailgating. Sometimes Ambrosia wishes he would just disappear. Mindy looks like she's not sure what to say. Then she asks what Pepe looks like. Ambrosia says she doesn't know. You'd have to ask Exidor.
Then you know that Pepe doesn't exist?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, a lot of people believe in men from outer space. I've never seen one, but that doesn't mean they don't exist.
Good point.
Exidor sees Pepe, and he's never lied to me yet. Besides, you have to believe in the man you love.
You know, you're a very special person, Ambrosia.
No, I'm not. Because I haven't been totally honest with you or Exidor. Pepe isn't the real problem.
He's not?
No, I'm old-fashioned. Before a couple gets married, I believe the man should ask the woman to marry him.
Well, what if Exidor did propose to you? Would you marry him then?
No.
Why not?
Mindy, he's never told me he loves me.
Georgia Engel is really bringing a sweetness and sincerity to this performance. She believes in Exidor, and he's never lied to her. And Mindy is right that Ambrosia is a very special person. And of course, there's the cute little thing of her mentioning men from outer space. There's also a poignancy to this, despite the ridiculous situation, that Exidor has not told Ambrosia that he loves her. I'm not really clear how they got engaged. Maybe she proposed. She obviously wants more from this relationship, and it's very frustrating for her. There's a nighttime exterior of the house, and we get our first glimpse of the attic, I think, for this whole season. And there's some new things like a baby carriage, and I wondered if maybe that was Sally's. Exidor is on his knees, miming swimming. Mork enters and asks what Exidor is doing. Exidor says, "Isn't it obvious? I'm drowning in your lake." So it was already implied that he was going to drown himself with the big rock tied to his leg. Exidor tells Mork to get out of here and let him sink in peace. Mork says he has great news. Ambrosia wants him back, so now Exidor wants Mork to save him.
Wait! The council drowned! What do I do? Quick, grab my dinghy! All right. Just tread rock, I'll be right there. Here, a life preserver, hold on to that. Hurry, a grouper's got me by the leg! Yeah.
I found this really fun and playful, and I liked their teamwork together. It almost felt like improv in the way they incorporate the props and so on. Exidor says that Mork saved him from a watery grave. Then he asks when he can see his fox, and we saw earlier in the season that Exidor refers to women or girlfriends as foxes. Mork says Ambrosia's coming over tonight. Exidor just has to do one thing, and she'll take him back. Exidor says he'll do anything.
All you have to do is say, I love you, Will you marry me?
That's it. Back to catfish country.
No, wait. I thought you loved Ambrosia.
I do.
Why can't you tell her?
Mork, this may come as a bit of a surprise, but I am just a little eccentric.
No.
You see, Mork, I just can't get myself to say that phrase. In the orphanage where I was raised, nobody ever said it to me.
You've got to. It's for your own happiness.
But you don't understand. It's a psychological problem. Everyone's allowed one little hang-up.
There she is.
I can't say it.
Well, if you don't, you're going to lose her. Now remember, I love you.
That's really nice. But what are we going to do about Ambrosia?
So again, this is surprisingly poignant, including Exidor being raised in an orphanage where no one told him that they loved him. We will meet Exidor's mother in another episode, so I don't remember how they explained that, if they did. And of course, Exidor realizes he has a psychological problem, but he thinks it's just his one little hang-up and he's otherwise mentally healthy. And I like the thing of Mork saying I love you and the way Exidor reacts, and it's kind of sweet. The doorbell rings again and Mindy opens it to Ambrosia. We can hear Exidor off stage saying, "Let me go! Don't grab me there!" Don't know where Mork grabbed him. Ambrosia asks if Exidor is here, and I thought it was a tribute to Georgia Engel's acting, that she does not break. She just plays this character at that level. Mindy says she doesn't know. She'll check. And then she calls out to Mork that they have company. Mork says they'll be right down, and then there's a crashing sound. Mindy leads Ambrosia over to the couch. She says the men are probably freshening up a bit. Ambrosia says Exy can't go anywhere unless he's just so. Exidor yells, "No, I won't go!" But he swings down on the rope. Mork hurries down after him. Exidor says, "Oh, hi there, Dimple Hips." And she says, "Hi, Exy." Mindy and then Mork ask if Exidor has anything he wants to say to Ambrosia. He says he can't think of anything. Mindy says to think again. Mork lifts Exidor and carries him a bit closer to Ambrosia, saying that Exidor can do it. Then Mork and Mindy stand next to each other by the other end of the couch. Exidor tries to tell Ambrosia, but he can't. He says his life is over, because he's just very melodramatic in this episode. Mork suggests charades, because Exidor has trouble communicating with H-E-R. Mindy quickly says, "I love to play charades." Mork says Exidor will be the giver and Ambrosia will be the receiver. So again, doing a little bit of that sportscaster thing.
First word.
I got it! I love you, and will you marry me?
I thought you'd never get it.
The answer is I love you too, and you bet.
Oh, I can't believe it! She loves me!
So we've got Mork and Mindy helping and Ambrosia enthusiastically finishing the sentence and accepting the proposal. We have Exidor being very modest about them kissing, and Mork and Mindy react to that. And it's just, again, all very cute. With the robe still over her, Ambrosia asks Exy to walk her home alone. He kicks out Pepe, saying that the wedding bells have broken up that old gang of ours, which is a reference to an old barbershop quartet song from the 1920s. He tells Pepe, "Hasta luego, amigo." Ambrosia says, "Thank you, sweetheart. You're too good to me." He says he'd do anything for her because I love you and I want to marry you. And then there's a little bit of the wedding theme and the audience claps. Mindy looks charmed by this, and then she turns and she looks kind of smugly at Mork. Ambrosia is pleased that Exidor said this twice in one night. He says there's a lot more where that came from. He puts his arm around her, and they exit to more applause. Mindy puts her hand on Mork's shoulder and says it took the both of them, but they pulled it off. She suggests they go to the deli, and she'll buy him a soda. And I'll just note that other than the scene at Ambrosia's apartment, this is one of those rare episodes, especially in this season, that were all set in Mork and Mindy's apartment and mostly in the living room. I didn't miss the deli scenes. I didn't miss the Da Vinci's. I certainly didn't miss Nelson. Interesting that they at least had to throw in a reference to it. He feels sorry for Pepe, because where is Pepe going to get work with an invisible green card? Apparently Pepe is an immigrant, which might have been implied earlier. I don't know. And I can't remember if Pepe was in other episodes, but yeah, it does seem to be a lot of Spanish names among Exidor's friends. Mindy looks dubious, but she takes Mork's hand and starts to lead him towards the door. There's another nighttime exterior of the house. Mork summons Orson, and this time he calls him the Great Super Scooper in the Sky. Not exactly a fat joke. It sort of sounds like either an ice cream joke or a pooper scooper joke. I don't know. Mork says he's so excited. His best friend is getting married next week. So a couple things. Once again, Mork refers to somebody other than Mindy as his best friend. I mean, it was clear that Mork is Exidor's best friend, but why is Exidor Mork's best? And another thing is that in this scene, they're building up to the episode where Exidor and Ambrosia will get married, but that didn't actually air next. There's another episode in between. Even though I'm pretty sure this topic must have come up in over a year on the planet, Orson asks how long marriages on Earth last. Mork says until death do they part, or a quick trip to Reno, for a divorce, of course. Whichever comes first. But he thinks Exidor's marriage is going to last forever. I don't know what he's basing this on. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of infatuation. I don't know. I mean, I guess Ambrosia is probably one of the few women who would find Exidor so wonderful and put up with his crap. But whether that would be forever is debatable. And in fact, I think by season 4, Ambrosia is out of the picture. We'll see when we get there. Orson asks if Exidor is the one that Mork told him was strange even by Earth standards. Mork says, with love, there are no standards. No matter how strange or bizarre you are, there's always a certain someone who will love you for it. Love gives everyone a chance to be happy. Orson says Mork makes it sound like a lottery, and I don't know if Mork had already covered lotteries or if they have lotteries on Ork. Mork says in a way it is a lottery. The only losers are the ones who won't gamble. Exidor's marriage promises to be one of the most unusual in the history of mankind. Don't be late, and don't come empty-handed. And then he does his Nanu Nanu sign-off. So really building this up, I mean, in the history of mankind. We got to be pumped for this episode, and it's just a shame it wasn't the following week. But ABC would be doing a lot more messing around with the Mork and Mindy schedule, as we'll see in the second half of the season. I found this one of the sweetest and cutest episodes in a long while, certainly of season 2. The presence of what they call special guest star Georgia Engel is a big part of that. I think she's used very well. It's fun to see her play off of Robert Donner and bring out sweetness and uncertainty with him. Just a whole range of emotions. And we get Mork and Mindy playing matchmakers, smoothing things out, and so that was really nice. And, you know, basically other than the Orson tag at the end, it's just the four of them playing off of each other. And like I said, I don't miss the Da Vinci's and Nelson, so if they can do this with a guest star and an occasional character, I kind of have to wonder why they can't do more with these people that they've promoted into the opening credits. And I won't even go into Mr. Bickley at this point. I will talk about him when he comes back. I just found it a solid episode. Like I said, there's some questionable stuff done with Spanish speakers and things about sanity. It's a little bit uncomfortable. I would rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 egg scale, which measures how well it delivers what I'm looking for in the series. And I'm going to give this a 3 out of 4. I thought it was pretty solid, especially for season 2. Laughed out loud a few times. And like I said, it was just really sweet and cute. I also rate these episodes on a 0 to 4 heart scale, which measures how well it supports the Mork and Mindy romance. And this was a little bit odd in that it was about love and romance and relationships, but not about Mork and Mindy. There is a lot of them lightly touching each other, but I think it's mostly in the platonic zone. So I'm going to go with a 1 this week. there had been a line or two about Mork thinking about marrying Mindy, like we got somewhat in season 1, I would feel differently. They're kind of like a couple here, and they're kind of fighting like a couple. You could argue that this is how close friends and roommates would argue as well. I did like to see them teaming up, although they definitely had different perspectives on the Exidor-Ambrosia relationship. As she points out, they teamed up and it all worked out well in the end. Definitely a nice palate cleanser for some of the weaker parts of this season. Lovely to see Georgia Engel as always. I recommend this episode. 3 eggs, 1 heart. This is Paula Schaffner with episode 36, The Exidor Affair. Nanu, Nanu, is this the last of Pepe?
Georgia, Georgia, the whole day through, just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind.